So, what if I told you that the lowest, most lifeless point on the surface of the Earth, a place where the water is literally so chemically toxic, it burns your eyes?
Right, the Dead Sea.
Exactly. And the ground there regularly and violently swallows buildings whole. But what if this place might actually contain a perfect mathematical blueprint, just hidden miles beneath its surface?
I mean, it sounds like the setup for a science fiction novel, to be honest.
It really does.
But we are talking about a very real, heavily monitored and, geologically anomalous location. You step out into this environment, and just the atmospheric pressure alone tells your body you are somewhere completely alien to the rest of the planet.
Yeah, welcome to today's deep dive. We are plunging into the paradoxical extreme world of the Dead Sea.
And the stack of sources we have for you today is not just your standard geological survey.
No, definitely not. We're pairing extensive geographical, historical, and hydrological data with this highly detailed, comprehensive analytical text by Dr. Khaled Waleed.
Right. And Dr. Waleed's research is what takes this from, a standard earth science discussion into something entirely different.
Completely different.
He has constructed this sweeping thesis arguing that the Dead Sea is literally the only geographic location on Earth that perfectly aligns with a highly specific matrix of Quranic descriptions.
Which is fascinating. He calls this basin a scientific mirror of the Quranic universe.
But before we go any further, let's lay out the ground rules for you, the listener.
Right, very important. The sources we are working with today blend modern earth sciences with religious and theological interpretations of geological phenomena.
Exactly. And our mission here isn't to debate theology or endorse religious viewpoints or tell you what to believe.
Yeah, we are not taking sides here. We are just here to impartially report on Dr. Waleed's synthesis.
We're going to examine the very real physics, the chemistry and archaeology he brings up, and just explore how he connects those hard scientific measurements to ancient texts.
It's basically an exercise in seeing how disciplines that are usually kept miles apart can be overlaid. Okay, let's unpack this.
So, to even begin evaluating Dr. Waleed's thesis, we have to establish the physical baseline of this environment. We really need to strip away the myth and just look at the raw numbers.
There's raw data.
Right. As of 2025, the surface of the Dead Sea sits at 439.78 meters.
Which is roughly 1,443 feet.
Exactly, below sea level.
That is the lowest dry land on the entire planet. I mean, if you drive down into the Jordan Rift Valley, your ears pop constantly.
Oh, yeah. The pressure change is intense.
The atmospheric pressure is significantly higher down there, and the air is thick. It feels almost heavy in your lungs.
And that's before you even touch the water, which, by the way, drops down another 304 meters into the crust.
Wow. And the defining characteristic that everyone knows, of course, is the salt.
Right, the salinity. Recent measurements put it hovering around 34.2%.
Which is crazy because most of us have been swimming in the ocean, and that sits at about 3.5% salinity.
Yeah, so we are talking about water that is nearly 10 times saltier than the open ocean.
But here is where a lot of the common knowledge kind of stops.
Yeah.
It's not just a lot of ocean water crammed into a lake.
No, not at all. The chemistry is fundamentally different. Let's break that down, because it's central to literally everything that happens later in Dr. Waleed's analysis.
Okay, lay it on me.
So standard ocean salt is about 85% sodium chloride, everyday table salt.
Right.
But in the Dead Sea, sodium chloride only accounts for about 30% of the mineral makeup.
Wait, really? Just 30%?
Yeah. Over half of the dissolved solids, about 50.8% actually, is magnesium chloride, along with massive amounts of calcium chloride and the highest concentration of bromide ions found in any natural body of water.
But why the drastic difference? Like, if it's all just salt coming off the rocks, why doesn't it match the ocean?
Well, it really comes down to precipitation sequences and just the sheer age of the basin. Over millions of years, as water evaporates, different minerals crystallize and drop out of the water at different concentrations.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, sodium chloride precipitates relatively early. So for millennia, massive amounts of standard salt have been crystallizing and forming these thick layers on the floor and shores of the basin.
Leaving the other stuff behind.
Exactly. What's left behind in the liquid, the brine, becomes increasingly dominated by the highly soluble magnesium and calcium chlorides. It becomes this dense, almost oily-feeling chemical soup.
Which fundamentally alters the physics of buoyancy, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you've seen pictures of people reading newspapers while floating in the Dead Sea, it's because that dissolved mineral content pushes the density of the water up to 1.4 kilograms per liter.
And standard fresh water is exactly 1 kilogram per liter.
Right. And the human body is mostly fresh water. So according to Archimedes' principle, an object immersed in a fluid is buoyed up by a force equal to the weight of the fluid displaced.
Basic physics, yeah.
Because the Dead Sea water is so incredibly heavy, you displace far less of it before that upward force equals your body weight.
You literally cannot sink. You just bob on the surface like a cork.
That's so wild. And the reason this bizarre chemical soup exists in the first place brings us to the core geographical feature of the region. The Dead Sea is an endorheic basin.
Meaning a closed system.
Yeah, water flows in, but nothing flows out. I always think of it as like a geological roach motel for water.
That's a great way to put it, actually. The Jordan River, along with various seasonal wadis, flows down from the surrounding mountains, carrying tiny trace amounts of dissolved minerals.
Right, and it enters this massive depression, and it's totally trapped.
There are no outlet streams at all. The basin is locked in by higher elevation terrain on all sides.
So where does the water go?
Well, the only exit strategy for the water is evaporation into the incredibly hot, arid desert air. The H2O molecules turn to vapor and escape, but all those heavy mineral salts are left behind.
So millions of gallons of fresh water are pouring in from the Jordan River every single day.
Exactly.
But wait, if you pour a glass of tap water into a bowl of heavy syrup, they don't just stay separate, they eventually mix. So why hasn't the Dead Sea simply diluted over the millennia?
This is where fluid dynamics comes into play, and it's actually where Dr. Khaled Waleed makes his first major connection between the physical geography and the ancient texts.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he looks at this endorheic nature, this locked basin, and he maps it to the Quranic concept of hijr majur, which translates to a closed, forbidden, or strictly confined place where water is settled in the earth with no escape.
Wow, that matches perfectly.
But to answer your question about mixing, it doesn't dilute because of a phenomenon called a halocline.
A stratified density barrier. Right.
Yes. The density difference we just talked about, the fresh 1 kilogram per liter water hitting the 1.24 kilogram per liter brine, is so extreme that it acts almost like a physical wall.
Like oil and vinegar.
Sort of, but even more stark. The incoming fresh water from the Jordan River is lighter, so it literally floats on top of the hypersaline Dead Sea water.
That blows my mind.
For most of recorded history, the Dead Sea was actually 2 completely distinct lakes sitting on top of one another in the exact same bowl.
So you've got a warmer, fresher layer on top, maybe 30 or 40 meters deep, resting on this cold, incredibly dense bottom layer.
Exactly. And Dr. Waleed takes this specific hydrological phenomenon and links it to the Quranic phrase Maraj al-Bahrain, or the 2 seas.
How does the text describe it?
Well, the text describes 2 bodies of water, one fresh and sweet, one salty and bitter, that meet but have a barrier between them, a barzakh, preventing them from overstepping their bounds.
A barrier.
Yeah, Dr. Waleed argues that the halocline of the Dead Sea is the literal physical manifestation of this barzakh.
It's an invisible wall defined purely by thermodynamics and fluid density.
Precisely.
But it's not a completely unbreakable wall, is it? Because the sources mention an event in the late 1970s that completely upended this.
Right, so the stratification was incredibly stubborn for centuries. The top and bottom layers essentially just ignored each other, but a halocline relies on a really delicate balance of temperature and density.
Makes sense.
Throughout the 1960s and 70s, humans were aggressively diverting the incoming fresh water from the Jordan River for agriculture.
Oh, right. Messing with the input.
Yeah. With less fresh water coming in, the top layer of the Dead Sea started to slowly become saltier and denser through evaporation.
But it still floated because it was heated by the desert sun, right?
Mm.
And warm water is less dense than cold water.
Right, until the winter of 1978 to 1979.
What happened then?
That winter was unusually cold. The surface layer's temperature absolutely plummeted, and as water cools, it becomes denser.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Suddenly, this top layer, which was already heavy with accumulated salt, cooled down just enough that its density finally equaled the density of the ancient saturated bottom layer.
A thermodynamic tipping point.
Exactly. The moment those densities equalized, the barrier failed. The entire sea physically turned over.
Wow.
The deep, ancient waters rose, the top water sank, and the whole basin mixed for the very first time in centuries. It drastically altered the chemistry before eventually re-stratifying later.
That's a massive geological event triggered by just a slight shift in temperature and water input.
It really is.
But let's look beyond the water itself for a moment. If the salt prevents aquatic life, and the evaporation is so intense, what does this do to the surrounding land? Because the area around the Dead Sea isn't exactly a lush paradise.
No, it is profoundly hostile to standard life, and this brings us directly into Dr. Waleed's thesis regarding the regional climate and agriculture.
Okay, tell me about the climate.
The Dead Sea sits deep in the rain shadow of the Judean mountains. The weather systems coming off the Mediterranean dump their moisture on the western slopes, leaving the eastern Rift Valley incredibly arid.
How arid are we talking?
We're talking barely 50 to 100 millimeters of rain a year in the north and almost zero in the south.
Wow, so you cannot grow a standard crop in those conditions without intense modern irrigation. The soil is just parched.
But Dr. Waleed points out that it isn't just the lack of rain that makes the valley barren, it's something called aerosol salinity.
Aerosol salinity, like salt suspended in the air itself.
Yes, exactly.
But how does that happen? I thought evaporation only took the H2O and left the salt behind on the ground.
Evaporation does, normally. But the Dead Sea environment is highly dynamic. You have high winds, breaking waves along the shore, and the sheer intensity of the heat. All of this causes microdroplets of brine to be whipped up into the atmosphere.
Oh, wow.
And as the water in those microdroplets evaporates midair, it leaves microscopic crystals of salt just suspended in the wind.
That sounds toxic.
It is. This aerosolized salt settles like a slow, invisible snow over all the surrounding soil.
So the land is being continuously naturally salted from the air.
Yes. The soil chemistry becomes utterly toxic to standard agriculture. You absolutely cannot cultivate stored staple crops, what ancient texts refer to as grain in its ear, like wheat, barley, or corn.
Because of the salt content.
Right. The cellular structures of those plants just cannot process the massive intake of magnesium and sodium chlorides. The roots undergo osmotic shock, and the plants desiccate and die.
So nothing grows there at all.
Well, the only things that naturally survive there are highly specialized halophytes. Plants like tamarex or salicornia, which have evolved biological mechanisms to either sequester or excrete the salt.
Okay, so Dr. Waleed takes this biological reality and maps it to the Quranic description of a valley without agriculture.
He does. He argues that the text isn't just describing a desert. I mean, there are many deserts, but a valley fundamentally and uniquely poisoned against staple crop cultivation by its own atmospheric chemistry.
That's a really specific distinction.
It is. And that hostile surface environment is entirely dictated by what is happening miles beneath it.
Right, the geology.
Exactly. The barren soil, the incredibly deep basin, the trapped salt water. None of this exists without the underlying tectonic architecture. The Dead Sea sits directly on the Dead Sea Transform Fault, or the DST.
Now, I want to make sure we really understand this mechanism, because when you say fault line, it usually makes people think of California and earthquakes.
Yeah, that's the common association.
So what exactly is a transform fault, and why does it create a 400-meter deep hole in the ground? If the plates are just sliding past each other, shouldn't they just scrape along like two cars sideswiping? Where does the deep basin come from?
That is the crucial question. So the DST is the boundary between the African tectonic plate to the west and the Arabian plate to the east.
Okay.
It is a left lateral strike-slip fault, meaning if you stand on one plate and look at the other, the opposite plate is moving to your left.
Got it. So a side-by-side sliding motion.
But the fault line is not a perfectly straight line. Imagine pulling a piece of taffy that has a zigzag or a kink in it.
Oh, I can picture that.
At certain points along a sliding fault, there are bends. Where the plates slide past a bend, they don't just scrape, they actually pull away from each other. Geologists call this transtension.
Transtension?
Yeah, the crust literally stretches, thins out, and massive blocks of rock drop downward into the gap.
So the Dead Sea is essentially a pull-apart basin. The ground is literally falling out from underneath it because the continental plates are stepping away from each other.
Yes. And because the crust is stretched so thin at this pull-apart zone, the intense heat from the Earth's mantle is much closer to the surface.
Oh, wow.
It isn't just a cold, dead lake. The friction of the tectonic plates grinding and the thin crust allow geothermal energy to vent upwards.
We're talking about hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the Dead Sea.
Exactly. Deep beneath the dense brine, groundwater seeps down through the cracked bedrock, gets superheated by the geothermal energy near the mantle, and shoots back up into the bottom of the sea.
That's incredible.
There are actual columns of hot gas bubbling up from the fault line.
So it's essentially a giant hypersaline slow cooker sitting directly on top of a geological stove.
That's a perfect analogy, and that geothermal reality is the linchpin for Dr. Waleed's next synthesis.
What is he connected to?
He equates these subterraneans and thermal vents, the hot gas columns, and the localized tectonic heating directly to the Quranic concepts of bar major, which translates to the heated, swelling, or boiling sea.
A boiling sea.
And fawaran al-tanur, the erupting oven or vent.
You know, calling a lake a boiling sea seems totally contradictory until you look at the bathymetry and realize there is literal geothermal venting happening in the deep water column.
Right, and Dr. Waleed emphasizes that the Dead Sea is the only body of water on the entire planet combining this specific extreme matrix of features.
Because it has all of them at once.
Exactly. You have an endorheic closed basin, extreme hypersalinity, a density-driven halocline, and active subterranean volcanism driven by a pull-apart transform fault. It is literally a closed oven heating a heavy chemical soup.
And that geological oven is spitting up more than just hot water, right? It's spitting up something that directly ties into the darkest, most violent chapters of human history in this region.
You're talking about the asphalt.
Yeah, because the Dead Sea isn't just salty and hot, it's full of asphalt.
The discharge of asphalt, or bitumen, is one of the most anomalous features of the whole basin.
How does it even get there?
Well, deep within the earth, organic matter trapped in the sinking sedimentary rocks is subjected to the intense geothermal heat and pressure of the fault line. It's essentially cooked into hydrocarbons, creating these rich asphalt soups.
So the lake literally burps up chunks of black asphalt.
It does. Sometimes it's just small pebbles, but sometimes massive multi-ton blocks of solid bitumen float to the surface. Yes, especially during seismic swarms when the fault line shakes them loose. This was so prominent in antiquity that the Greeks and Romans actually named the body of water Lake Asphaltites.
Lake asphaltites.
Yeah, and the ancient Egyptians actually established specific trade rights just to import Dead Sea asphalt for use in their mummification processes.
Okay, so you have a tectonically unstable basin, venting hot gas, loaded with pure sulfur deposits, and constantly spitting up highly flammable asphalt.
It is quite literally a powder keg.
Which brings us to the archaeological site of Tal el-Hammam, located just northeast of the sea.
Right. The excavations at Tal el-Hammam have revealed a layer of destruction dating to around 1650 BCE that basically defies standard archaeological explanations.
What did they find?
Well, we're not looking at a city that was conquered by an army or burned in a standard fire. The evidence points to an instantaneous, catastrophic event that archaeologists identify as a cosmic airburst.
An airburst, like a meteor or a comet fragment entering the atmosphere at tens of thousands of miles an hour. Right. Where it compresses the air in front of it until the pressure and heat become so immense that the object detonates before it even hits the ground.
Yes, very similar to the Tunguska event in Russia in 1908, but happening directly over a populated urban center in the Bronze Age.
The physical evidence left behind is staggering, and it requires a profound understanding of physics to really unpack.
It does. The excavation layers contain pottery shards where the outside clay has been flashed into glass while the inside remains entirely untouched.
Which means what?
It indicates a thermal pulse of immense heat, thousands of degrees that lasted only milliseconds.
Wow. They also found shocked quartz, which only forms under massive kinetic pressure. But the real smoking gun is the nanodiamonds.
Right.
How does an airburst create diamonds?
Well, diamonds are simply carbon atoms arranged in a highly organized crystal lattice. To force carbon into that structure requires gigapascals of pressure and thousands of degrees of heat.
Which usually happens deep underground.
Normally, yes, deep within the Earth's mantle over millions of years. But in the fraction of a second when a cosmic bolide detonates in the atmosphere, the shockwave creates a localized environment of extreme pressure and temperature right on the ground.
So it flash forges them.
It literally flash forges organic carbon, like wood or plant matter, into microscopic nanodiamonds. You simply do not find nanodiamonds in the ashes of a standard city fire.
They also found high concentrations of mysterious, naturally occurring sulfur balls embedded in the destruction layer.
Right.
And some of them analyzed at up to 98% pure sulfur.
Yes, and this is where Dr. Khaled Waleed bridges the gap between modern astrophysics, geology, and ancient scripture.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. How does he connect it?
Dr. Waleed links the destruction of Tal el-Hammam directly to the story of the prophet Lot, which is the foundational narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Ah.
The ancient texts describe the destruction of these cities as a rain of sigil.
And sigil is usually translated as baked clay, brimstone, or asphalt.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed argues that the Dead Sea's unique geological fingerprint perfectly mirrors this ancient narrative. You have a cosmic airbust providing a catastrophic thermal pulse and shockwave from above.
Right.
You have natural pure sulfur balls. You have abundant, highly flammable asphalt, seeps native to the area. An airburst detonating over an environment rich in sulfur and bitumen would ignite those materials.
It would literally rain burning brimstone and asphalt down on the valley.
Yes.
But wait, the text also says the city was turned upside down. If an explosion happens in the sky, it crushes things downward. It doesn't flip the ground. Unless we look at what the fault line was doing at that exact moment.
And this is where the synthesis is so compelling. The Dead Sea is a pull-apart basin. It is continuously experiencing tectonic dropping.
Oh, right.
When a massive kinetic shockwave from an airburst hits a waterlogged, tectonically active fault zone, it triggers extreme seismic activity and a phenomenon called soil liquefaction.
Where the violent shaking causes solid, saturated soil to temporarily lose its strength and behave like a liquid.
Right. Exactly. Heavy structures sink instantly, lighter underground materials are forced to the surface, and the ground itself churns and collapses into the fault line.
That's terrifying.
Dr. Waleed posits that a 3,600-year-old cosmic impact raining fire from the sky occurred perfectly in tandem with catastrophic tectonic dropping and fault line liquefaction from below.
The city was pulverized from above and swallowed from beneath.
It was literally turned upside down.
He also notes that Tal el-Hammam is situated right on a historical trade route linking the Levant with regions further south.
Right. The location is key.
The text explicitly states that people pass by them morning and night. The ruins weren't hidden. They were a massive visible warning on a major Bronze Age thoroughfare.
So we have evidence of destruction raining from the sky. But Dr. Waleed's research suggests that the sky itself over the Dead Sea isn't just an empty conduit for meteors.
No.
The atmosphere above this basin is just as physically anomalous as the ground below it.
This might be the most mind-bending part of the entire thesis. Dr. Waleed draws a profound parallel using two very specific Quranic phrases. The sky which returns, which is the word Raj, and the earth which cracks, which is Sada.
Let's establish the crack first, because we've kind of laid the groundwork for that.
Okay, let's do it.
Sada translates to a literal splitting or cracking. Geologically, there is no better description for the Dead Sea transform fault. It is a massive, active rift in the Earth's continental crust.
Right, the pull-apart basin.
As the pull-apart basin drops, millions of years of sediment wash into the gap. Deep drilling and seismic reflection surveys reveal that the sedimentary fill inside this crack goes down an astonishing 8 to 12 kilometers deep.
12 kilometers.
Yeah, it is the quintessential splitting of the Earth.
But mapping a physical fault line to the phrase, the earth which cracks, is relatively straightforward. The phrase, the sky which returns, Raj, that requires us to look at the meteorology, because the sky over the Dead Sea acts like a funhouse mirror.
It comes down to a phenomenon known as a violent thermal inversion.
Tell me about that.
In standard atmospheric physics, the higher you go, the colder the air gets. Hot air from the ground rises, expands, and cools in the thinner atmosphere.
But a thermal inversion flips the script.
It does. Because the Dead Sea is essentially a 400-meter deep trough surrounded by high desert plateaus, it traps air. The intense sun heats the dense, high-pressure air sitting directly on the water's surface.
Okay.
But at night, the desert plateaus above cool rapidly, and that cold air slides down into the basin, wedging itself under a layer of hotter air.
Like a lid.
You end up with a persistent, sharp boundary layer where cooler, denser air is trapped beneath a lid of much hotter air.
And because the density of air determines its refractive index, like how it bends light, this sharp temperature boundary acts as an optical mirror.
Exactly. The inversion layer literally bends and reflects light rays back down toward the surface, creating highly complex floating optical mirages.
Wow.
But the returning phenomenon goes far beyond visible light. This dense atmospheric lid creates what meteorologists call a ducting effect. It traps and bounces sound waves back down, allowing sound to travel anomalous distances across the water. It heavily reflects and bends radio and microwave signals, playing havoc with communications.
Now I have to stop you here.
Oh.
Yeah, because the sources mention something that sounds almost like pseudoscience. It claims this inversion layer bounces back gamma rays.
Ah, yeah.
Gamma rays are highly penetrating electromagnetic radiation. They go through lead. An air density layer can't act like a mirror for gamma rays the way it does for visible light.
And you're completely right to challenge that. It's vital to clarify the specific mechanism Dr. Waleed references because it is not a literal optical mirror for gamma radiation.
Okay, so what is actually happening?
It involves radioactive gases. The deep tectonic fault line, the crack we talked about, constantly emits low levels of radon-222 gas.
Radon gas.
Yes, which is a radioactive decay product of uranium naturally found in the deep bedrock.
Okay, so the fault is venting radioactive gas into the air.
Normally, that gas would simply dissipate high into the atmosphere. But because of the severe thermal inversion layer acting as a physical lid over the basin, the radon gas is trapped near the surface.
Oh, I see.
As the radon decays, it emits gamma radiation. So, specialized sensors detect a highly localized signature of gamma radiation that is trapped and effectively returned to the surface by the atmospheric conditions.
That makes perfect sense. The sky is holding the radiation down like a blanket.
Exactly.
So Dr. Waleed looks at this entire meteorological system, the bending of light, the trapping of sound, the ducting of microwaves, and the confinement of radon gas emissions, and argues that this is the literal physical embodiment of the sky which returns, or Raj.
He does. You have a sky acting as a physical mirror situated directly over As-Sada, the deepest continental crack on Earth.
It's elegant mapping of atmospheric physics to ancient texts.
Very elegant.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Surely the Dead Sea isn't the only place on Earth with a fault line and an inversion layer.
Fair question.
What about the Salton Sea in California? It's on San Andreas Fault, it's salty, it's below sea level. Or the Afar Depression in Ethiopia. Doesn't Dr. Waleed's unique location argument kind of fall apart when you look globally?
Well, Dr. Waleed specifically addresses those global comparisons to prove his point. He actually compiled a matrix to test the uniqueness of the Dead Sea against other extreme environments.
Let's look at the Salton Sea then.
Take the Salton Sea. It has a fault, and it's saline, but it is only about 70 meters below sea level, not 430 meters.
Okay.
It lacks the profound sedimentary depth. More importantly, it completely lacks the massive subterranean asphalt and pure sulfur volcanism.
And the Afar Depression.
Afar has incredible volcanism and is below sea level, but it is not an endorheic lake producing a hypersaline halocline, nor does it possess the specific asphalt seeps.
I see.
Dr. Waleed's argument is not that a thermal inversion or a tectonic crack is unique in isolation. His thesis is that the Dead Sea is the singular location on the planet where the entire matrix converges.
All at once.
Yes. The hypersalinity, the density barrier, the endorheic basin, the asphalt volcanism, the airburst evidence, the deep continental crack, and the violently returning sky. They all exist in one single geological fingerprint.
Having established all these qualitative physical realities, the chemistry of the salt, the mechanics of the fault, the atmospheric lid, Dr. Waleed's research takes a massive pivot.
It really does.
He shifts from geology to spatial geometry. He looks for a mathematical symmetry to tie the entire basin to the structure of the texts.
And this is where the synthesis becomes highly quantitative. Dr. Waleed presents a numerical alignment between the physical, measurable dimensions of the Dead Sea and the structural architecture of the Quran itself.
Okay, let's get into the numbers.
The Quran, as a foundational text, contains exactly 114 surahs, or chapters.
Okay, so 114 is the structural baseline.
Dr. Waleed then turns to modern hydrological data. Using advanced mapping and volume calculations, the current water volume of the Dead Sea, the actual physical amount of hypersaline liquid residing in the basin today, is precisely 114 cubic kilometers.
114 cubic kilometers of water, matching the 114 surahs. That is a striking number.
It is.
But, water levels fluctuate. How does he ground that number?
By looking at the container itself, he doesn't just look at the water. He looks at the hydra major, the geological bowl that holds the water. He analyzes the total volume of the sedimentary basin that forms the Dead Sea Rift.
But how do geologists even measure the volume of a hole that is filled with kilometers of dirt and rock?
They use a combination of deep core drilling, gravimetry, and primarily seismic reflection.
Seismic reflection.
Yeah. They send intense sound waves deep into the ground. These waves travel through the soft sedimentary fill and bounce back when they hit the hard, dense, crystalline bedrock at the bottom of the fault.
Oh, like sonar.
Exactly. By timing how long the echoes take to return, they can map the exact 3D dimensions of the subterranean basin.
It's essentially using underground sonar to map the crack.
Precisely. And based on these geophysical surveys, the dimensions of the core sedimentary basin are approximately 150 kilometers long and 8 kilometers wide.
Okay.
The average depth of the sedimentary fill down to the bedrock is 9.5 kilometers. If you multiply those dimensions to find the volume of the container, 150 times 8 times 9.5, the result is exactly 11,400 cubic kilometers.
11,400.
Yeah.
Which is exactly 100 times 114.
Yes. Dr. Waleed argues this creates a double digital lock.
A double digital lock.
The volume of the water currently inside the basin perfectly mirrors the 114 surahs, and the total geological container carved out by millions of years of tectonic forces is precisely 100 times that number.
That's fascinating.
He views this multi-layered mathematical symmetry as absolute proof of a divine mathematical design encoded directly into the geography of the Earth.
It is genuinely staggering to step back and look at the methodology here.
It really is.
We are taking the most advanced tools of modern science. Satellite topography, seismic reflection, deep crustal drilling, and using them to measure cubic kilometers of rock in order to reverse engineer and validate the structural numbers of an ancient spiritual text. The sheer scale of that spatial geometry is incredible.
It represents a fascinating frontier where quantitative earth science intersects with theology.
However, there is a massive tragic caveat hanging over this entire discussion.
Unfortunately, yes.
That 114 cubic kilometers of water, that perfectly balanced mathematical, chemical, and ecological marvel, it is evaporating fast.
Very fast.
Human intervention over the last century has put this entire basin on the brink of collapse.
The modern reality of the Dead Sea is just grim. We have to look at the numbers again. In 1930, the surface area of the Dead Sea was roughly 1,050 square kilometers.
And today?
As of 2025, that area has plummeted to just 554 square kilometers. It has lost nearly half its surface area in less than a century.
And the elevation is plummeting too, right?
It is.
The water level is dropping by more than 1 meter, over 3 feet, every single year. I've seen footage of tourist resorts that were built right on the water's edge in the 1980s. Today, those hotels require visitors to take a shuttle bus across a massive, barren expanse of salt and mud just to reach the shoreline.
It's wild to see.
What is driving this extreme acceleration?
It is entirely driven by industrial human intervention, primarily through the choking off of its only life support, the Jordan River.
Right, the input.
Historically, the Jordan River brought over 1.2 billion cubic meters of fresh water into the basin every year, balancing out the extreme evaporation.
Would that change?
Drastically. In the mid-20th century, the surrounding nations began aggressive diversion projects to fuel population growth and agriculture. The National Water Carrier Scheme, completed in 1964, completely rerouted the water.
Wow.
Today, the annual inflow from the Jordan River is a trickle of less than 100 million cubic meters.
So we cut the input by over 90%. But the output, the brutal evaporation under the desert sun, hasn't stopped. In fact, it's been artificially weaponized, hasn't it?
Correct. On both the Israeli and Jordanian borders, massive chemical extraction companies, specifically the Dead Sea Works and Arab Potash, have effectively partitioned the shallow southern end of the sea.
What did they do?
They have built massive dikes, turning vast sections of the basin into industrial evaporation pans.
So they intentionally pump the water into these shallow pools, let the sun boil it away, and harvest the minerals left behind.
Exactly. It's an incredibly lucrative industry. They extract massive amounts of potash, which is a critical component for global agricultural fertilizers, and bromine, which is used in countless industrial applications from flame retardants to pharmaceuticals.
I'm guessing that makes a lot of money.
These operations generate billions of dollars annually. But the environmental cost is the rapid, unnatural boiling away of the sea.
And this isn't just a loss of scenery. The rapid drop in water level is triggering a terrifying, highly destructive geological crisis all along the newly exposed shores.
Yes, the sinkholes.
Let's explain the chemistry behind why the ground is suddenly opening up and swallowing the landscape.
It comes back to the interaction between fresh water and salt. For thousands of years, as the Dead Sea fluctuated naturally, it left behind thick subterranean layers and pillars of solid salt buried beneath the shoreline dirt.
Okay.
As long as the Dead Sea was full, the water table was high, and those salt pillars were submerged in hypersaline brine.
And because brine is already fully saturated with salt, it cannot dissolve anymore.
Yeah. Exactly. The underground salt pillars remained perfectly preserved and structurally sound, literally holding up the ground above them.
But as the human-caused evaporation drives the sea level down, the local groundwater table drops with it.
And the brine retreats.
Right. And now, when flash floods occur or fresh water runs down from the mountains, it enters the soil and encounters these ancient, newly exposed subterranean salt pillars.
And fresh water dissolves salt incredibly fast.
So it just melts them away.
The incoming fresh water aggressively dissolves the structural salt layers beneath the surface. It washes the salt away, leaving behind a massive, invisible underground cavern.
Oh, man.
The dirt and asphalt crust above is suddenly suspended over absolutely nothing. Eventually, the structural integrity fails, and the ground collapses inward without warning, creating massive craters.
There are thousands of these sinkholes now. They appear instantly, swallowing up sections of highway, entire palm tree groves, and abandoned tourist complexes.
It's devastating.
When you read Dr. Waleed's synthesis, there is a chilling parallel here. He points to an ancient Quranic command regarding a flood that says, "O earth, swallow your water."
Yeah.
As you watch the ground literally collapsing, violently opening up to consume the remaining moisture, and dragging the landscape down with it, it feels like that ancient command is playing out in devastating real-time geology.
It is a profound and terrifying visual manifestation. The receding water is causing the earth to literally consume itself.
Has there been any serious engineering effort to halt the collapse? You hear about mega projects trying to save it.
The most prominent was the Red Sea Dead Sea Water Conveyance Project. The engineering proposal was massive.
What was the plan?
Build a pipeline stretching hundreds of kilometers across the desert to pump seawater from the Red Sea in the south. They planned to desalinate a portion of it to provide desperately needed drinking water for Jordan and Israel.
And what about the leftover brine?
They were going to pipe the remaining hypersaline brine byproduct down into the Dead Sea to stabilize the dropping levels.
Pumping ocean water across the desert to refill a dying lake. Why did it fail?
A mixture of intense political friction, massive financial costs, and severe environmental fears.
Environmental fear.
Yeah, environmental scientists warned about the chemistry. Red Sea water is rich in sulfates. The Dead Sea is rich in calcium. When you mix high sulfates with high calcium, they react and precipitate gypsum.
Oh, so that would change the whole chemical makeup.
Scientists feared that dumping Red Sea brine into the basin would trigger a massive chemical reaction, turning the entire surface of the Dead Sea cloudy white with gypsum crystals, or even triggering uncontrollable red algae blooms in the top layer.
Wow.
Ultimately, the geopolitical and financial hurdles were just too high, and the project was officially abandoned in 2021 before a single pipe was even laid.
So what does this all mean for the future of the Dead Sea? The evaporation pans continue, the Jordan River remains diverted, and the sea continues to vanish by a meter every year. What is the ultimate end game here?
Well, physics dictates that it likely won't disappear completely. As the water volume decreases, the concentration of the dissolved salts will continue to rise.
It'll get even saltier.
Exactly. Eventually, the brine will become so incredibly dense, so saturated, that the rate of evaporation will actually slow down drastically. It will reach a new, much smaller, highly concentrated equilibrium.
But it won't be the same.
No, the vast, historically significant sea that ancient peoples wrote about is fading rapidly.
Which brings us to the end of a truly heavy, complex journey today. We started by looking at the raw, extreme metrics of the lowest point on Earth.
Right.
We unpacked the chemistry of the brine, the fluid dynamics of a density halocline, and the violent transtension of a left lateral transform fault, creating a 400-meter deep hydrothermal slow cooker.
And through the meticulous, specialized lens of Dr. Khaled Waleed's research, we explored how those physical realities might serve as a scientific mirror for ancient theology.
We analyzed the astrophysics of a cosmic airburst, the pressure required to forge nanodiamonds, the atmospheric ducting of a thermal inversion, and the massive spatial geometry required to align an 11,400 cubic kilometer basin with the structure of a text.
It is a tremendous amount of data to process.
It really is. But as our guide to the mechanisms behind all of this, what is your ultimate takeaway?
I think the most compelling aspect of Dr. Waleed's thesis is how it forces us to tear down the walls between disciplines. We are deeply conditioned to separate empirical geology from human history and separate both of those from ancient theology.
Yeah, we usually keep them in different boxes.
But when you examine an environment as extreme as the Dead Sea, you realize that mapping the geological fault lines actually enriches our understanding of the Bronze Age history, and analyzing the ancient texts might actually prompt us to look for anomalies in the atmospheric physics.
They feed into each other.
Exactly. They are distinct languages using different vocabularies, but they are all attempting to describe the exact same profound underlying reality of the Earth.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over on your own. For thousands of years, humans have stood on the salt-crusted shores of the Dead Sea and viewed it through a very narrow lens, as a symbol of stagnation, of toxicity, of divine punishment, a barren, lifeless endpoint where water just goes to die.
Right.
But if we look closely at the mechanisms we discussed today, and if Dr. Waleed's synthesis of ancient texts and modern geophysics holds true, this seemingly lifeless basin is actually the most dynamic, interactive geological structure on the planet. It is constantly communicating. It's venting heat from the mantle, reflecting light and radiation from the sky, chemically stratifying its waters, and violently shifting its crust.
It's incredibly active.
It has survived millions of years of tectonic stretching, weathered the extreme thermal pulse of cosmic airbursts, and served as a silent witness to millennia of human empires rising and falling along its faults. And yet, after surviving all of that, it is our modern industrial appetite, our insatiable thirst for diverted river water, and our financial demand for fertilizer minerals that is rapidly draining it away.
It's a sobering reality.
It makes you wonder, if the Dead Sea is truly a mathematical and scientific mirror of ancient knowledge encoded into the Earth, what other unique geographical fingerprints, what other planetary libraries are we currently bulldozing or boiling away without ever taking the time to understand the mechanisms hidden beneath their surface? The next time you see an image of someone floating effortlessly in that dense, heavy water, remember that they aren't just floating in a salty lake, they're suspended in a vanishing mirror.